We have a pay-per-view coming up known as the Forbidden Door, and we already know our main event, which is important. It is going to be Swerve Strickland taking on William Ospreay. And after watching last night's episode of Dynamite on the 12th of June, 2024, my brain has spoken and said to me, Simon, I think William Ospreay, that's not his name, William Ospreay, should lose. So, my friends, it's one of those videos, so please instantly let me know your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe when you're down there too. Why the flub not? But yeah, it's kind of interesting, but I just think the way that AEW portrayed these two on this week's episode of Dynamite was actually really clever because there is no reason for them to dislike each other. In fact, as Swerve said, he considered them quite friendly, but it was Will Ospreay that won the Casino Gauntlet, which is one of my favorite new matches in probably around about a decade. So now they do find themselves coming together, and if you want to argue it's face of the company versus face of the company or people pushing for that spot, I would totally get it. But by the end of the night on Dynamite, after Will Ospreay had defeated Phoenix, it was just the most wonderful match ever because it's so damn crazy. That's when you started to get a bit of tension because Swerve felt like Will wasn't taking this seriously and that he's not mature enough to hold two titles. So, of course, Ospreay had his international title over one shoulder and he snatched the world championship and he said, I can do it. And he even tweeted that out earlier too when Swerve snatched it back and even said to him, you're lucky, you're my buddy, otherwise I'd put you in the grave. Now, as always, if you said this to somebody in real life, you would now go to jail. But apparently you can just say this in wrestling and no one actually cares. So that is where the animosity is now coming from. And I actually thought it was really good because it is a babyface versus babyface match, which by and large are really hard to get right. Like even if you go back to WrestleMania when it was Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior, I remember watching this as a kid and being like, well, what am I meant to do? I had no idea. And I don't think that wrestling always has to be that way. I think given that you do have so much programming and that it goes every single year without a break, sometimes you do need to put two heels together or you do need to put two babyfaces together. But the key is to come up with an idea beforehand where you go, well, this is going to be 2 + 2 = 4 because it makes sense. And now, yeah, Swerve feels like Will Ospreay is just maybe screwing around a little bit too much, but also maybe deep down in his tootsie toes, he's like, man, it's Will Ospreay. He's doing great right now. Maybe I need to be wary of him, which is why when he went through his AEW pay-per-view schedule, I suppose, he was like, that pay-per-view smashed it. This pay-per-view smashed it. But that last pay-per-view, which is the most recent one, I don't know, Will, I don't think you have that killer instinct, which is when Strickland once again was like, I'm always happy to pull the trigger because I used to be kill shot. I swear, you got to stop threatening to murder people. But that's when my own brain got worrying, and I was like, okay, well, what do you do at the Forbidden Door, right? What do? Do you take the belt off Swerve? Do you give it to Will Ospreay? Do you sort of, set it up for a 2, maybe even a 3-match program overall? And I realized that actually, sometimes in professional wrestling, having the, what's the word I'm looking for, but the badness on your back, that's not the right word I was looking for, of being undefeated can absolutely be a bit of a crutch. It was the same when Oscar got called up from NXT. Now, I actually think WWE could have treated that way, way better as WCW could when they broke Goldberg's streak. But it does put you in a position where that almost becomes your entire character. Now, I don't think that's going to happen to Will Ospreay. It's not like everyone is, shouted from the rooftops, oh my gosh, he just keeps winning and winning and winning. But we know this because ever since he has arrived, he hasn't lost, and he's won a championship, which stands to reason, even if you started watching AEW next week, if you do have a brain in your brain, doesn't make sense, clearly I don't have a brain, you would be able to figure it out. But if you allow Swerve to be the guy to take Will Ospreay's first loss from him, so he can parade that around, and you have already penned in a date, not pencil unless you get injured or something, which we don't want to happen, the date when Will Ospreay is going to win that championship, I think you can tell an amazing story here, and even start setting Swerve and Will Ospreay up as sort of two people that can feud in 2024, 2025, 2026, which is doubly good when it comes to Strickland, because when Hangman Adam Page comes back, I think they have that kind of chemistry as well, and this is something that AEW most desperately needs. Like, ideally, you would find someone that would just become a megastar, like over on WWE. It's sort of Cody Rhodes leading the charge at the moment. Before that, it was sort of a Roman Reigns, but again, that's like a different experiment we could talk about in a different video. But then it's John Cena and Steve Austin and The Rock, blah, blah, blah. But over on AEW, they've definitely had a few of these from time to time. John Moxley would be one, especially coming out of the pandemic era. But if right now, when AEW is trying to change some of their metrics around, although I still think they're doing pretty damn good, if you can't find that one individual who's going to take you to the next level, why wouldn't you just go, okay, well, let's push a bunch of people together so they can be greater by the sum of their parts. So if all of a sudden you're telling your audience that you are going to have this epic feud between Will Ospreay and Swerve, then Hangman comes back and says, oh man, he's going to have an epic feud with him too, and then maybe you can bring somebody else into the equation, Kenny Omega, for example, when he's good to come back, then they may be able to get people who may used to watch and don't watch anymore, more excited or more tempted to come back, or whatever it may be. Because let's face it, if you are not watching AEW right now, it's not because they're not having, in the modern day, what we would describe as banger matches, right? You can tune into any single AEW show, Dynamite, Collision, Rampage, and you're probably going to see at least one match where you go, this would have been on pay-per-view 15 years ago, and now I'm just getting it boomed onto my face on a Wednesday night. So maybe it does come down to characters or stories or whatever it may be. Sometimes it's just the secret sauce in the pudding. And that's when I was looking at this, I was like, okay, maybe there is some justification to the criticism that Swerve doesn't feel like a quote-unquote proper world champion right now. I would always argue that the first time somebody does win a belt, it's sometimes you need to lose it and win it back before you start feeling like you're of that ilk. But if he beats a Will Ospreay and we bang this drum over people's heads and Will Ospreay sells it too, like, oh man, I had my big old chance and I wasn't able to do it, I think it's going to work wonders for everybody involved. And then absolutely it's going to justify Strickland having that belt too, because he just beat arguably the best wrestler in the world. That's all you need to do. That's a nice, easy story you can tell anyone. My grandma could walk in here right now and she would understand that. I mean, I would freak out because one, my grandma doesn't like wrestling, but two, she'd been dead for a long old time. So I'd be like, man, what the flab happened? And you come back now to talk about wrestling? What about that time I was sad? Just to double back around though, you do absolutely have to know when Will Ospreay is going to win that title. That doesn't mean you can't shift those things around, because you should always be listening to your audience and you should always be taking in feedback, and maybe that does come at All In. Now, the only reason I would question that a little bit is that if we're going to get Forbidden Door in a couple of weeks and then you're going to have the Owen Hart Cup and the winner of that is probably going to take on Swerve when we get to Wembley, well, it depends how you look at it, right? Because if Will Ospreay wins that, it's going to tell the audience he's likely going to get the belt on round 2, which is perfectly fine. When you know you've got a Pac entering that tournament, you've got a Bryan Danielson entering that tournament, and probably some other guys I'm not thinking about right now, well, then you start to go, okay, if Bryan Danielson wins, and All In is going to be one of his last matches for AEW, that's a position he absolutely deserves to be in. Maybe he even beats Swerve Strickland, I don't know. Again, different video for a different day, but then you have to bring the Nigel McGuinness aspect into the equation, because apparently that could be a match on the cards. Now, the reason I think all of this is important is it opens up the conversation and it opens up multiple pathways that we can absolutely walk down. Because again, another issue that AEW definitely had in 2024 is you can watch most matches and go, that guy's going to win and that guy's going to lose. It was one of my favorite things about last night Dynamite, in the sense that Don Callis family, or members thereof of the Don Callis family, actually beat Orange Cassidy, Mark Briscoe and Kyle O'Reilly. That was a surprise to me. So hopefully next time I see one of these matches, I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe it is going to go somewhere else. So the more that we can introduce that back into AEW, where you feel like, I have to tune in now to see who's going to win, is the better. But even if you do telegraph Will Ospreay's win over and over again, you're like, it's happening at this pay-per-view, it's happening at this pay-per-view, I just think you've got to crown him as a champion eventually, and I think at that point you do have to run with him. But you do not want to do that at the expense of Swerve, who has basically climbed a mountain in AEW and earned his place. And I think that's one of the reasons people are so far behind him, because he did it. I'm sure Tony Khan was behind him for sure, but Swerve did it with all those crazy matches. He was doing it with Hangman, with his promos. And let's not forget, when he was finally embraced as a babyface, he was still doing some pretty flubbed up stuff. He was still breaking into gymnasiums and trying to kill Nick Wayne, and he tried to steal Hangman Adam Page's kid. I mean, that's what he did. Try and spin it otherwise. He tried to kidnap a child, but I suppose it was just the way he carried himself. We've seen it time and time again, right? Sometimes if you become the ultimate bad guy and you're also delivering on the ring and you're delivering when it comes to promos, fans can't help but gravitate towards you. It's why wrestling is amazing, because it makes absolutely no sense. But look at all the different things we're now putting into that main event scene. And I think ultimately the reason why I'm glad that AEW is doing this match, at first I was like, oh man, it's too soon. When I realized one day I'm going to be dead, what are we waiting for? Is that Swerve can win, and that's a cool story. If Will Ospreay wins, that's a cool story. You just have to do the same thing with Swerve and go, okay, what are we doing with Strickland now? What's he doing next week? What's he doing next month? What's he doing in 6 months? Because if he comes back from that, gets another big win, and then starts going after Will Ospreay again, that will be Fabu. And let's not also forget, on this episode of Dynamite, we absolutely tease something between MJF and that scene. Because when we were having the Daniel Garcia versus Nick Comoroto match, I understand why Will Ospreay was watching, because Daniel Garcia obviously said, I want that international title, William Ospreay. That's another person that could beat Will, and it would do the world of good for him. We also saw MJF watching. Now, we don't know where that's going to go. What kind of interest does he have? But MJF will also be getting back to that tippity top place, probably after he beats Roosh next week. And this excites me. And just as my own personal blah blah, whatever that means. And just as my own personal rant quickly as well, if you did watch Collision over the weekend, it was Daniel Garcia versus Tate Mayfair, because of course we need to get a bunch of wins for Daniel. And listen, Tate, when it comes to my in-ring wrestling career, is my mortal enemy. he will always be the Joker to my Batman, but not really saying this, close your ears, as someone who has worked with Tate for a long ass time. Seeing him on AEW TV was flipping brilliant, man, because I know how much that guy bust his ass. So again, we're just going to put that over here. Good old Tate Mayfairs, and I bet you it's just round one. So I actually think AEW is in a really good place, and after watching Dynamite last week, I was like, man, I'm enjoying the majority of this show. And I know people now go, Simon, you enjoy the majority of all shows. It's just a bind liking things. It's really hard to wake up every day. But I totally understand that it's not all roses and peaches and cream. Like, I'm so confused about what the Undisputed Kingdom is anymore. I get that it's not really anybody's fault because Adam Cole got injured, but I don't get why Wardlow has vanished again. It just absolutely blows my brain. But also, this Christopher Daniels stuff isn't particularly landing with me. Just because he's a good guy GM and he told the Young Bucks and the entirety of the Elite, you are going to have to be in matches next week as we try and figure out who's going to challenge for your titles. And all managers and all seconds are totally banned. It's like, well, if you know that there's an interference problem in your company, why are you happy for it to run wild in other places? Now, when you take a step back, does this stuff matter? No. But if you want to put your nerd hat on, absolutely is something that I would address. Although I really like what the Elite is doing too, and they announced Blood and Guts, and they announced Blood and Guts while talking to Swerve Strickland. Now, I think Blood and Guts is happening late July, so it'll be about a month before All In, but way after Forbidden Door. So Will Ospreay hasn't really gotten involved in that at the moment. Swerve most definitely has. So does that give us a window into what we may be doing with the World Championship? Are the Young Bucks going to get involved? Are they going to help with Ospreay? And Will's going to be like, what'd you do that for, man? I love the fact that there's a lot of crossing of the streams on AEW TV right now. And even though the Ghostbusters told us that was a bad idea, I think at the moment it's the right thing for them to do, especially because right now, I mean, it's such a boring conversation, but we will know about the TV rights negotiations for All Elite Wrestling very, very soon. Unless you're a total mad person, some people watching this right now will be raging in their boots. Just drop me a comment. I don't care, man. Like, do all that stuff. We want them to get a good deal. Because if they do get a good deal, it's more money for the wrestlers, it's more competition, and it's no surprise that WWE has super rocketed it off into the skies. It's because they looked at the situation and went, man, we need to get back on track, and they absolutely did. And it's why Ricochet, I think they said recently that Ricochet's contract is actually up in July. So it means come late July, maybe even at that Blood and Guts show, he should be the 5th member on Team AEW, by the way. He can jump across to AEW. I'm sure he's getting paid loads of money. I'm sure he's been promised certain things when it comes to his creative. And that's great, because when your contract does come to the end, you don't just want to have one offer on the table. You want to have two. Just imagine it like your job. Now, while we're talking to the nut jobs, I don't know, but we've got here now anyway. Imagine you're in IT or you're stacking shelves, you're mechanic, whatever it is. If you knew that you could spread your services all over the place, which sounds absolutely terrible, you would do that because you want to ensure you get the best deal possible. And if there's only one mechanic or there's only one supermarket or one whatever, you're screwed. You're going to have to take it or leave it. And I just think right now, pro wrestling is better than it has been in years. It's so exciting. There's so much accessible content. You could have watched Dominion the other day if you wanted to. And trust me, when I was growing up, New Japan was like some fairy tale land that was never going to happen. And ties into the Forbidden Door. We're getting Naito versus John Moxley for the IWGP Championship. And you don't have to like that. You don't have to be into New Japan. I hate that kind of gatekeeping. Oh, you've never heard of this wrestler. You can't be a real fan. I don't care if the only person you've heard of is Cody Rhodes. That is totally fine. You enjoy it because it is a source of entertainment, but I just think there is something exciting about it. And just to really piss off the internet, there is a reason that WWE is working with TNA and they're working with Noah and they're working with Marigold, etc. I mean, I'm sure it's because they want to have some sort of power over the wrestling landscape, which I understand to a certain degree. But when you see your competition doing it, you're like, you always want to be on a level par, right? Otherwise you could fall behind. Now we do have AEW working with AAA and CMLL and New Japan. And over here we have Noah, we have Marigold. We have Jordan Grace turning up on NXT and just being the absolute beast. I love Jordan Grace. And I'm excited about Tatum Paxley going across to TNA. That annoyed me too. Tatum Paxley, how do you expect to make people bigger stars? I know, let's ring John Cena. John Cena, you want to go to TNA? John Cena don't need to go to TNA. Everyone calm down. So yeah, I just think given the position AEW is in, as we do get back on track, we can take some risks here, whether that is Will Ospreay being beaten or Swerve Strickland being beaten, and that just makes it far more interesting for the shows that you do watch. And in terms of Will Ospreay as a performer too, I should have seen who this was. You'll have to forgive me. It was on my Twitter. So if you read and go, you stole that from me, Simon, I totally did, and I'm super apologetic. I think Will Ospreay's greatest strength is that I've never seen anybody who was able to control his body in the way that guy is. Like when they went for the Spanish Fly fly, him and Phoenix, and something didn't work, he turned it into like, someone described it as a spinning air raid crash, although Will Ospreay then tweeted, the last thing I wanted to do was an air raid crash. But to have that kind of wherewithal, and again, to have that kind of control, he's totally next level. And you don't have to like him or his promos or anything like that, but I am just mesmerized by the guy. And I think there's always somebody that sort of moves wrestling into its next generation. Sometimes it can be promos. The Rock certainly did that and everyone tried to copy him. But when it comes to in-ring action, Will Ospreay is that guy. And I genuinely feel privileged that we are able to see it happen. And look, that's not what I want all my wrestling to be. There are other wrestlers out there who have their own style who I think are equally as good, but maybe I recognize that more from the past. Whereas when it comes to Ospreay, I mean, clearly inspired by the likes of Amazing Red or Pac or Ricochet, as William himself said. But he's taken all of his ideas and he's made it his own. And I just thought that Phoenix match was incredible. And I kind of had a moment during that too where, you know, I understand people are like, oh man, it's just match after match after match. And I was like, yeah, but I'm enjoying it to such a degree. Who even cares? Because it is just pro wrestling, the most important of the non-important things. Anyway, my point is this. He is so talented, he can lose a match. He can lose 2 matches. He can go after the world championship and have to dust himself off and try again because you'll put him in a ridiculous situation a week or 2 weeks after and you'll put a broom in there. He'll have the greatest match that you had ever seen. So, I don't know. This week to me in all of wrestling, it just felt really, really good. I thought Raw was great in terms of setting up Clash of the Castle. Can't wait for that pay-per-view this weekend. And I thought in terms of AEW getting the ducks in a row too, they absolutely smashed it as well. So I'm just excited and I just feel good. And I just sat down. I wanted to talk about Swerve Strickland versus Will Ospreay. And I'm very blessed to have the platform. And we've done it now and probably pissed a lot of people off. Feels good. Now, of course, please do like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Click the bell, ding, ding, so you know other videos are going live. Be part of the notification crew. And click this video on the screen. It's me predicting Clash at the Castle. Otherwise, if you are into fitness products, please go to grillermind.com/Simon. Use code Simon, you get 10% off. People always ask me, yes, I'm affiliated with them. Yes, I get a little bit of money every time you do buy a product, but I also use them. And you may have noticed I don't have many sponsors because I'm only going to take on sponsors that I think are really, really good. It's also patreon.com/Simon316. Simon316 on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads. Please come give me a follow because the numbers just help my brain. I don't know why. It's Simon J. Miller on TikTok, Simon Miller on Cameo. Get your personalized videos, whatever you want. Birthdays, Father's Day, Christmas, Hanukkah. I do not care. Also go to ProWrestlingTees.com/Simon Miller and buy yourself a stupid wrestling t-shirt today. My #1 sale, I don't have it here, is warm and fuzzy in my tum-tum. And as I've told you 1,000 times on this stupid channel, somebody once told me, you can't say warm and fuzzy in your tum-tum on a video. Well, I did say it, and now it's made me a bit of money too. So that's all thanks to you guys. I really do appreciate it. And thank you for watching, especially if you made it here. It's the end of the damn thing. Take care. See you soon.